The night was cold, and the wind howled through the narrow alleys of Laura City. Shayla held her son Jaren close to her chest as she walked, her fingers shaking against the thin cloth that covered his tiny body. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and every shallow breath he took sent a stab of fear through her heart. The fever had not broken, and the medics in the district clinic had told her that without a rare medicine, her child would not survive another week. The medicine was expensive, far beyond what a single mother like her could earn in a month, or in a year. Shayla had done everything she could think of. She had worked double shifts at the factory, cleaned houses until her back ached, begged friends for loans, and even sold her small collection of trinkets that had been her family's legacy. Nothing was enough. Each night, she sat by Jaren's small bed in the tiny apartment, listening to his uneven breathing, praying, begging the universe to spare him, even though her stomach knotted with the realization that she might lose him. She whispered stories of hope, of fields filled with light and laughter, trying to keep him warm with her words because she had no money to buy the blankets he needed. And then a shadow of a solution appeared, dark and frightening. A man in a long coat, his face hidden beneath a hood, approached her one evening outside the market. He spoke softly, almost soothingly, but his words carried a weight that made her heart clench. "I can get the medicine your son needs. All you have to do is work for me. I will take care of you and your child." Shayla's stomach dropped. She understood the unspoken meaning. The work he offered was not simple labor. It was something she had been taught since childhood to fear, something whispered about in the streets as a last resort for desperate women. She could almost hear her mother's voice warning her, telling her that no coin was worth selling herself. But then she looked at Jaren, curled up in her arms, coughing softly, his small chest rising and falling with a struggle she could not bear to watch. She walked home that night like a shadow, haunted by the thought of what she might have to do. Her neighbors whispered about her plight, but no one could help her. The city was indifferent, filled with people who walked past sickness and hunger as if they were invisible. Shayla had always believed in hope, in kindness, but that night, hope seemed a cruel joke. In the early hours of dawn, she sat by Jaren's bed, clutching his hand and feeling the tiny pulse that was all she had left of him. "I will save you," she whispered, tears running freely down her cheeks. "No matter what it costs me, I promise." The words felt hollow against the cold walls of the apartment, but they were the only shield she had against despair. She thought of her own life, simple, quiet, full of sacrifices, but none of it mattered if Jaren did not live. By midday, she had made a decision that would haunt her forever. She met the man again, her eyes dry but burning with determination. She would sell herself, not for pleasure, not for greed, but for life. She stepped into his car, silent, as the city rushed past, a blur of indifferent faces. Her mind was filled with Jaren's laughter, the way he clutched her finger when he fell asleep, the soft hum of his breath that had become the rhythm of her life. The man smiled, sensing her resolve, and for the first time Shayla felt a sharp pain that went beyond physical discomfort. It was fear, shame, and determination all wrapped into one. Yet even as he led her toward a life she never imagined, her thoughts remained with her son. She imagined him waking up, healthy, running to her with that small, bright smile that had always made her world feel wide and safe. She repeated it over and over in her mind, as if chanting could turn fear into hope. "He will live. He will live." That night in the rented room she had been given, Shayla cried quietly, hugging herself, imagining every moment of Jaren's life that she wanted to save. The city outside continued its indifferent hum, but inside her chest, a fierce fire burned. She had made her choice. She had chosen life for her child, even if it meant giving up the life she had known. And yet, in the pit of her heart, a fragile hope flickered. Perhaps, just perhaps, there might be another way, someone who could see her not as a desperate woman to be used, but as a person worthy of life, love, and a future. Shayla slept that night with her decision heavy on her shoulders, knowing that the next morning would bring her to a path from which there was no turning back. But even in the darkness, she clutched the thought of Jaren's smile, and it became a quiet, stubborn light in the shadowed corridors of her fear. The story of her sacrifice had begun, and the first chapter was written in tears, courage, and a mother's unyielding love. The next morning, the city felt colder, even more indifferent than before. Shayla stepped out of the room the man had given her, her hands trembling but her eyes firm. She had entered a world she had only ever heard whispers about, a place of strict rules, hidden doors, and people who measured worth in coins and obedience. The man called it a business arrangement, but to Shayla it felt like stepping into a cage, one she had built with her own desperation. The first days were the hardest. The building was tall and gray, filled with narrow hallways that smelled of metal and fear. Shayla learned quickly that this was not a place for questions. Every movement was watched, every word weighed, and the slightest hesitation could invite punishment. But she reminded herself constantly of Jaren. Each command she followed, each humiliating moment endured, was a brick in the wall protecting him. In the quiet hours, she would close her eyes and picture giving him the medicine, seeing the color return to his cheeks, hearing his laughter fill their small apartment again. That vision became a lifeline, a shield against despair. One night, as she carried out a task the man had demanded, a simple errand in the city streets, she noticed something unusual. A group of humans, not like the others who moved through these alleys like ghosts, were helping people quietly. They carried baskets of food, shared blankets with the cold, and spoke words of kindness that sounded strange in this harsh city. Shayla watched them from a distance, her heart aching with longing. For the first time in weeks, she wondered if there were people in this world who could see her as more than a shadow. But the reality of her life hit her hard the next morning. Jaren's medicine had been delivered, but the price she had paid had left her body and spirit raw. The man who controlled her noticed the hesitation in her movements, the exhaustion in her eyes, and he punished her with harsh words and long hours of work. Shayla bent beneath it, swallowing her pride, telling herself that each moment of pain was temporary, that each humiliating command was a seed planted for her child's life. She forced herself to remember the warmth of Jaren's small hand in hers, and it was enough to keep moving forward. Amid the darkness, there were small sparks. One evening, as she rested after a long day, a fellow woman whispered her name. Her eyes were gentle, her voice soft. "You are stronger than you know," she said, sliding a small piece of bread across the table. "Never forget that." Shayla took it, tears stinging her eyes. It was a small act, but in a place where humanity was rare, it felt monumental. She realized that even here there were glimpses of compassion, small threads of hope in the fabric of despair. But then came the night that almost broke her. Jaren had a high fever again, and Shayla had no medicine left. She clutched his tiny body, shaking, whispering apologies she could not believe he would understand. She imagined the life she had fought for slipping through her fingers, felt the weight of her choice like a stone crushing her chest. The man, noticing her distress, did not offer comfort or help. To him, it was weakness, and in his world, weakness had no place. Shayla understood that this life could never offer her child the warmth and safety she dreamed of. It could only buy a fragile, fleeting chance at survival. As she sat in the darkness, tears streaming silently, she heard a sound outside the window, a human voice calling, soft but firm. "Shayla, are you there?" Her heart leapt. She had not realized anyone knew her name outside this place, outside her role. When she peeked through the small gap, a tall human stood beneath the dim streetlight, a kind smile on their face, holding a small vial of clear liquid. "I heard about your son," the stranger said gently. "I can help." For a moment, Shayla could not speak. She had been taught to distrust humans, to see them as strangers who might exploit her further. But the sincerity in the stranger's eyes, the quiet strength in their stance, cut through the fear like a beam of light. She realized, with a sudden jolt of disbelief and hope, that someone in this cruel world might see her not as a tool, not as a commodity, but as a person, a human who could help her find a new path. That night, Shayla held the vial tightly, feeling a warmth she had not known in weeks. The shadows of her new life still lingered, the fear and shame still pressed against her, but for the first time there was something else, a glimmer of possibility, a promise that her sacrifice might not be the end of her story, but the beginning of another. She whispered to Jaren, who slept weakly in her arms, "We might have a chance, a real one." And for the first time since her journey had begun, Shayla dared to believe that the world could still surprise her with kindness, even in its darkest corners. The sun had barely risen when Shayla stepped out of the gray building, the vial clutched tightly in her hand. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear this time, but from hope she had not felt in weeks. The stranger who had found her last night was waiting at the corner of a quiet street, wearing simple clothing and a calm expression. "Are you ready?" they asked softly, and Shayla nodded, though her hands shook. For the first time, she felt the weight of possibility pressing gently against her chest, not the crushing burden of desperation. The human led her through the city's winding alleys, places Shayla had never dared to go before. The streets were alive with muted colors, with small shops opening and children laughing in the morning sun. It was a world apart from the gray walls and harsh voices of the man's building. For a moment, Shayla let herself imagine Jaren running through these streets, free, healthy, laughing with other children. The thought filled her with warmth she had almost forgotten existed. They stopped at a small clinic tucked behind a row of old trees. The human spoke to the staff quietly, and soon a medic appeared, taking the vial and preparing the medicine with careful hands. Shayla watched, her chest tight, as someone else handled the very thing that could save her child. The human beside her placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He'll be okay," they said. Their voice carried a certainty Shayla had longed for, the kind that did not demand payment, submission, or sacrifice. It was simple human compassion. Shayla thought about the life she had endured, the endless days of obedience, the shame and fear that had become her constant companions. She had survived because of love, because of Jaren, but now she realized that survival was not all life could be. She had never imagined someone would see her as more than a desperate figure in a cruel world. This human treated her like a person, worthy, capable, alive. She felt a strange emotion rise in her chest, hope, fragile but real. The medic administered the medicine to Jaren, and Shayla knelt beside his small bed, holding his hand and whispering encouragement. She watched the fever recede from his eyes, the color return to his cheeks, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe freely. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and Jaren's soft breaths. Shayla felt tears slide down her face, not from shame or fear, but from relief, from joy, from the realization that she had fought and her fight had not been in vain. After the procedure, the human who had helped her spoke again, their tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to return to that place," they said. "You can start over. There's work, shelter, a chance for both of you to live without fear." Shayla's throat tightened. She had spent so long thinking there was only one way, one terrible choice, that the idea of freedom felt almost unreal. Could she truly escape the man's grasp? Could she live without fear? She wanted to believe it with every fiber of her being. That night, Shayla walked home with Jaren asleep in her arms, the human walking beside her. The city looked different now, softer somehow, filled with possibilities. Shayla realized that even in a world that had seemed cruel and indifferent, there were people who could make a difference. Humans who could see her not as an object to be used, but as a mother, as a person deserving of life and dignity. She had entered the human's life in desperation, but now she saw that perhaps humanity itself held the key to a new beginning. She looked down at Jaren's peaceful face and whispered, "We are going to be okay, we really are." For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to smile. Her past would not disappear, and the scars of her suffering would remain, but she had a new path, one lit not by sacrifice alone, but by hope, kindness, and the courage of strangers who believed in her. And as she walked through the quiet streets, she realized that she had been given more than a chance to save her child. She had been given a chance to reclaim herself. For the first time, Shayla believed that she could live, not just survive. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change not just her life, but the life of her child and perhaps the world around them as well. Shayla woke to the soft hum of sunlight spilling through the small window of the shelter. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of safety that was not fragile or borrowed, but real. Jaren lay beside her, his small chest rising evenly, a peaceful expression on his face. She ran her fingers through his hair, marveling at the quiet miracle she had fought so hard to achieve. It was not just medicine that had saved him. It was the human who had chosen to help them, and the tiny spark of hope Shayla had clung to in the darkest nights. The days that followed were a learning curve unlike any she had faced. The human who had saved them introduced Shayla to a community of people who helped each other quietly, without fanfare or judgment. They taught her skills that could sustain them, a small garden that would grow food, ways to earn money honestly, and how to navigate the city without fear. Shayla's hands, once raw from long hours of harsh labor, now learned to plant seeds, repair broken tools, and manage a tiny home. Each new skill gave her a feeling she had not known in a long time, control over her own life. But even as she learned, her heart carried the memory of her past. The man who had claimed her, the endless hours of submission, the shame and fear, they were shadows that followed her quietly. Shayla knew that to truly live, she could not ignore them. She began to train herself, not with anger, but with determination. She exercised, built strength, and studied the ways of the streets. Every step was a reminder that she would never again allow fear to dominate her life. She had survived once. Now she would ensure that survival would become strength. Jaren, too, thrived under the new life. His laughter returned, filling the small rooms with warmth and light. He asked endless questions, curious about the plants in their garden, the city outside, and the human who had saved them. Shayla answered each one, her heart swelling with pride. She realized that the life she had almost lost had given her a profound understanding of love, not just as sacrifice, but as protection, teaching, and guidance. Every day she spent with him became a reminder of why she had fought so hard. One afternoon, as Shayla worked in the garden, a small crisis erupted. A fire broke out in a nearby alley, threatening the shelter and their modest belongings. Panic rose in her chest, but instead of freezing, Shayla acted. She gathered Jaren, grabbed buckets of water, and helped her neighbors carry belongings to safety. Her muscles ached, but she did not stop. The human who had once guided her watched with a quiet pride as Shayla's courage and quick thinking saved lives. In that moment, Shayla realized that she was no longer just a mother desperate to save her child. She was a protector, someone capable of facing danger and emerging stronger. That evening, as they sat under the soft glow of lanterns, Jaren snuggled into her side and whispered, "Mama, I like it here. I feel safe." Shayla held him close, tears spilling down her face. "You are safe, Jaren," she said softly, her voice trembling with relief. "And we will always be safe, I promise." The words were not just a comfort to him, they were a declaration to herself. She had faced despair, endured the worst the world could throw at her, and come out alive, stronger, and ready to protect her child at any cost. In the quiet hours before sleep, Shayla reflected on the journey she had taken. Every dark alley, every night of fear, every sacrifice had brought her to this point. She had sold herself once to save a life, and now, through courage, kindness, and the unexpected humanity of strangers, she had reclaimed her own. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not only for the human who had helped her, but for the strength she had discovered within herself. Shayla understood something profound that night. Humanity was not only the kindness of strangers, but also the courage one found inside when hope refused to die. She had learned that even in the darkest places, a single act of compassion could ignite a chain of change that saved lives and restored dignity. And as she watched Jaren sleep peacefully, she promised herself that she would not just survive anymore. She would live fully, protect fiercely, and ensure that their new life was one of freedom, love, and endless possibilities. The peace Shayla had built began to tremble one evening when a messenger arrived at the shelter, his face shadowed and unreadable. He carried no words of kindness, only a note sealed with the insignia of the man who had once claimed her. Shayla's heart sank before she even opened it. The letter was simple, cold, and unmistakable. He knew she had left, and he demanded her return, or her child would suffer the consequences. Shayla's hands shook as she crumpled the paper, but her mind was sharper than fear. She had come too far to retreat now. Jaren slept peacefully beside her, unaware of the storm brewing outside their small sanctuary. Her first instinct was panic, but then the lessons of the last weeks surged through her: courage, planning, and the realization that she was not alone. She had the human who had saved them, the community that had nurtured her, and most importantly, the strength she had discovered in herself. That night, Shayla could not sleep. She traced Jaren's tiny fingers with her own and whispered promises she intended to keep. "I will protect you," she said softly. "No one will take you from me, I swear it." Her mind raced through possibilities, strategies, and risks. She realized that her past was not finished with her yet, that in order to truly live, she had to face the shadow of it directly. Fear was not a reason to hide, it was a signal to act. The next day, she confided in the human who had become their protector. Together, they devised a plan. It would not be easy, and it carried danger, but Shayla felt a calm determination she had never known before. She would confront the man, not as a frightened woman, but as a mother who refused to be controlled. She would show him that the power he believed he held over her had been broken by courage, love, and humanity. When the moment came, Shayla walked into the man's territory with her head held high. He expected fear, submission, hesitation, but he found none. She stood firm, Jaren safe in the arms of a trusted ally who had followed her, and spoke with a clarity that surprised even herself. "You no longer have power over me," she said. "I am not yours to command. I am a mother, and my child will never be your threat or your payment." Her voice carried the weight of every trial, every sleepless night, every sacrifice she had endured. The man's expression hardened, his eyes searching for weakness, but he found only resolve. He realized slowly that Shayla had changed. The desperate girl he had once manipulated no longer existed. In her place was a woman who had faced despair and turned it into strength. The tables had shifted. The fear he wielded so easily was powerless against a love that had endured impossible trials. Shayla did not back down. She negotiated, not with fear or money, but with the truth of her courage. The man eventually withdrew, understanding that no threat could bend her will without destroying his own influence over others. Shayla left that place with her head high, not only victorious but transformed. She had faced the darkest chapter of her life and emerged not broken, but unbreakable. That night, as Shayla returned to the shelter, the city felt different, lighter, almost alive with possibility. Jaren ran into her arms, his laughter echoing through the small rooms. She hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of a victory that was both personal and profound. It was not a victory of violence or manipulation, but of endurance, of love, and of humanity. She had not only protected her child, she had proven to herself that courage and kindness could overcome even the most ruthless darkness. Shayla lay beside Jaren that night, exhausted but triumphant. The shadow of her past had returned and tried to pull her back, but she had risen above it. She whispered a quiet promise into the darkness. "We are free now, free to live, to love, to grow. Nothing can take this from us." For the first time in her life, she truly believed those words. Her journey was not over, but she had crossed a threshold from which fear could no longer claim her. And in that threshold, Shayla found something extraordinary, herself. The morning sun spilled golden light across the small shelter, painting the walls with warmth that Shayla had almost forgotten existed. Jaren ran barefoot across the floor, laughing as he chased a small wooden toy she had carved for him. For the first time in weeks, Shayla felt a quiet joy settle in her chest. The world, once harsh and unforgiving, now felt alive with possibility, and she realized that she had earned this moment with every ounce of strength she had. The human who had helped them continued to guide Shayla gently, showing her ways to build a stable life. They introduced her to honest work, people who trusted her, and a small network of allies who believed in helping others, not taking from them. Shayla learned to manage resources, grow food, and even protect herself without fear. Each day brought small victories: a patch of thriving vegetables, a repaired roof, a smile from a neighbor who once ignored her. These were victories that reminded her that life was not only about surviving. It was about building, about creating a world where she and Jaren could truly belong. One afternoon, Shayla and Jaren walked through the market. The sense of baked bread, fresh fruits, and warm spices filled the air. Shayla watched her son's eyes widen with wonder at the colorful stalls, the chatter of the merchants, and the laughter of other children. She realized that for the first time, he was experiencing a childhood untouched by fear and desperation. Every joyful expression on his face felt like a shield against the memory of the days they had suffered. Shayla's heart swelled with gratitude for the human who had made this life possible. Yet Shayla did not forget the past that had brought her here. She spent quiet evenings teaching Jaren about courage, about the importance of standing for what is right, and about the strength found in kindness. She told him stories of hardship, but also of hope, ensuring that he understood that the world could be harsh, but that humans were capable of extraordinary compassion. These lessons were not just for him. They were for herself, a reminder that she had grown stronger because she had chosen love over despair. One evening, Shayla stood on the rooftop of their small home, looking out over the city. The streets that once seemed cruel now glowed with the warmth of countless lives intersecting. She saw people helping each other, laughing, working together. She felt a quiet pride in being part of this world, a contributor rather than a victim. The shadow of the man who had once controlled her felt distant now, almost unreal, like a nightmare that had lost its power in the light of courage. Shayla's bond with the human who had saved them deepened over time. They did not seek recognition or reward, only the quiet satisfaction of helping lives transform. Together, they created a small network of safety and support for others in the city who struggled, giving back the kindness that had saved Shayla and Jaren. She realized that humanity was not just the capacity for cruelty, but the capacity to lift others, to offer a second chance, and to change the trajectory of a life with a single act of courage. At night, after Jaren had fallen asleep, Shayla often sat by the small lantern in their room, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the desperation, the sacrifices, all of it had led to this life of possibility. She no longer felt the weight of the past as a burden, but as proof of her resilience. Every trial had forged her into a mother capable of protecting, nurturing, and loving without hesitation. Shayla finally allowed herself to dream openly. She imagined a future where Jaren could grow strong, where they could explore the city freely, where their lives were no longer dictated by fear or oppression. And as she looked at her sleeping son, she whispered softly, "We have survived Jaren, and now we can live." The words were more than a promise. They were a celebration of life reclaimed, of courage honored, and of humanity that had given them a second chance. The first light of dawn broke across the city, spilling gold and pink over the rooftops, and Shayla stood at the edge of their small garden, breathing deeply. The air smelled of earth, flowers, and the quiet promise of life. Jaren ran toward her, his laughter echoing like music across the morning streets. In that moment, Shayla felt a peace she had never known, a freedom she had longed for through months of fear, sacrifice, and uncertainty. Their journey had been harsh, but they had emerged into a world that offered not only survival, but life itself. Shayla remembered the nights of despair, the endless shadows that had pressed against her, whispering that she had no choice, that her child would be lost. She thought of the man who had once claimed power over her, the cruel reality she had endured, and the moments when hope seemed like a distant dream. And yet, here they were, alive, safe, and stronger for every challenge. It was a triumph not born of luck, but of courage, love, and the unexpected kindness of a human who had seen her as more than fear and desperation. The human who had saved them walked beside Shayla, carrying supplies for the garden, smiling quietly. They had never sought recognition, only the quiet knowledge that lives could change if someone took the first step to help. Shayla had learned from them that strength did not always roar. Sometimes it was quiet, persistent, and full of compassion. She had seen that humanity could shine even in the darkest places, that people could lift others instead of crushing them, and that a single act of courage could ripple into a life transformed. Jaren, full of energy and curiosity, explored the small neighborhood with wonder, waving to neighbors who had come to know them as part of their community. Shayla watched him, her heart swelling. Each smile, each playful shout, each small step he took in freedom was a victory she had fought for with every ounce of her being. She realized that her sacrifice, her courage, and her relentless hope had not been in vain. Life could be cruel, but it could also be beautiful, and she would never let him forget that. That evening, the family gathered in their modest home for a small meal. Shayla sat beside Jaren, watching him eat, his cheeks rosy and his laughter spilling into the room. She realized that the world she had once feared, the people, the streets, the city itself, was not only a place of danger, but also of connection, kindness, and shared humanity. And she had found her place within it, no longer as a shadow of fear, but as a mother, a protector, and a witness to the strength humans could offer one another. Shayla's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought them here. She had sold herself once, driven by desperation, and faced the harshest trials of life. But she had also found that even in despair there was hope. That hope had come through the unexpected kindness of a human who had chosen to see her as a person worthy of life, and in that choice she had been given a new beginning. She realized that this was what humanity could achieve, the power to lift, to heal, and to transform. As night fell, Shayla tucked Jaren into bed, running her fingers through his hair and whispering, "We are safe and we are free. Always remember that." His eyes closed with trust, his small hand in hers, and for the first time she felt a quiet confidence that they would never return to fear. She stepped outside onto the balcony, looking up at the stars shining over the city. Each light seemed like a reminder that even in darkness, there were sparks of courage, hope, and humanity that could guide a life forward. Shayla smiled, feeling the strength and freedom she had fought for, and whispered to herself, "We survived the worst, and now we truly live." The world was still imperfect, still challenging, but it was theirs to shape with love, courage, and the simple power of being human. In that moment, Shayla understood the greatest lesson of her journey, that even in the deepest despair, a single act of kindness, a single choice to fight, could change everything. and that life, when reclaimed, could shine brighter than any darkness that had come before.